Hello everyone, for this tutorial video I'd like to explain how to solve trig equations that have complex arguments instead of simply x or something times x. Unfortunately, owing to how complex these types of equations are, there is no one set way to solve for all of them. They will have to be solved on a case-by-case basis, and will often call for applications of methods outside of trigonometry, such as factoring. For example, if we are given 5 times the cosine of 2x minus 1 equals negative 3, and we want to solve it for x, we would divide both sides by 5. Then we would take the inverse cosine to get 2x minus 1 by itself. And it looks like so far the method is similar to what we saw in the last video, but we will see problems later on that involve more complicated methods. Case in point, if we were told 2 times the cosine of 6 times y plus 11 times the cosine of 6 times y times the sine of 3 times y all equals 0, we see that the tricks we have been relying on so far will not work. But what we can see is, if the product is 0, then this means either of the factors must also be 0. So this means the cosine of 6 times y equals 0, or 2 plus 11 times the sine of 3y equals 0, as we factor out cosine of 6 times y from both terms, and then use the property of a product of 0 must have at least one factor equal to 0. So we solve cosine of 6 times y equals 0 by doing pi halves or 3 pi halves, or when you get y by itself and divide by 6, it becomes pi twelfths or pi quarters, and the 2 pi times the infinite amount of integers now becomes pi thirds times the infinite amount of integers. By similar reasoning, we solve 2 plus 11 times the sine of 3y equals 0 by subtracting 2 from each side and dividing by 11, then taking the inverse sine of 3y, and then finally dividing our answers by 3 to get y by itself. So in conclusion, we have 4 distinct angles rather than 2, owing to how complex the problem was at this point. Lastly, if we are given 4 times the sine squared of t over 3 minus 3 times the sine of t over 3 equals 1, we would first notice that 4x squared minus 3 times x minus 1 equals 0, and when we solve that by factoring it, we get 4 times x plus 1 times x minus 1 equals 0. So x is either negative 1/4 or positive 1, although this does not seem related to the original question at all. It actually is if you stop to look at it carefully, because we see the sine of t thirds must be our x in this formula. So this leads us to conclude that sine of t over 3 equals negative 1/4, or sine of t over 3 equals 1. Both are valid. So we take the inverse sine and multiply by 3. We see that the left hand gives us 2 solutions per usual, but the right hand gives us only 1 solution because of what the unit circle would indicate, namely that the sine is 1 only at 90 degrees or pi half. Now that we have figured out the most sophisticated types of trig equations, we are prepared to discuss calculus concepts, starting with the basic concept of a limit in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe if you found this video informative, and make sure to see other tutorial videos, and follow me on either Facebook or Twitter for more content.